What if I told you that Johnny Depp has just taken on a role so raw, so deeply personal, that even the toughest crew members on set found themselves wiping away tears? The man who brought us unforgettable characters like the mischievous captain. Jack Sparrow, the reclusive Edward Scissorhands, and the fantastical Willy Wonka has now stepped into a role that is grounded, heartbreaking, and hauntingly real. And the world is beginning to take notice. Not just for the performance, but for what this role reveals about Johnny Depp himself. The buzz started with a single leaked photo. It showed Depp on a crumbling street in what looked like a war-torn city, crouched low to the ground, clutching an old photograph with trembling fingers. He looked older, thinner, emotionally hollow, not in the way actors pretend to look broken, but like someone who had lived through things no one should. The internet exploded. Fan pages began dissecting the image. Film forums speculated wildly about the plot. And soon, news broke about the indie film quietly being shot under the working title Whispers of the Frontline. Unlike his previous fantasy-heavy roles, this time Depp is portraying a grieving war journalist, a man who has seen too much, lost too many, and now struggles to keep his grip on reality. The film is said to be inspired by the real-life story of a war photojournalist who spent decades documenting conflicts in places most of us only hear about in passing: Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, and who ultimately succumbed to the weight of the trauma he captured. It's a character layered with guilt, rage, sorrow, and silence. And insiders say that Depp didn't just act the part, he became it. Sources close to the production have shared that Depp was immediately drawn to the script, reportedly crying as he read it for the first time. He called it a mirror held up to the darkest corners of the human experience, and more tellingly, a reflection of ghosts I've met in my own past. What that meant wasn't immediately clear, but for longtime fans familiar with Depp's own personal trials over the years, from legal battles to heartbreak, substance struggles, and the painful unraveling of his public image, it wasn't hard to read between the lines. This role for Depp wasn't just another job, it was a confrontation with his own demons. To prepare, Depp took an unorthodox path. He disappeared for nearly 3 weeks before principal photography began. No public appearances, no press, no paparazzi sightings. He was said to be holed up in a remote cottage in rural France with nothing but stacks of war footage, old journals from real-life journalists, and boxes of vintage photographs. One crew member revealed that Depp even went as far as eating only military rations during that time, trying to inhabit the emotional and physical state of a man who'd been living on the edge for far too long. When he finally emerged, something had changed. It was like seeing a ghost, one member of the costume department said. He didn't just look tired, he looked haunted, but in the best way possible, if that makes sense. Like he'd already begun living as the character before the cameras ever started rolling. Another insider described how Depp arrived on set each morning in full costume, makeup minimal, and never once broke character until filming wrapped for the day. Director Leila Jordan, known for her fearless approach to emotionally charged material, made an unusual decision that took Depp's performance to the next level. For key scenes, especially those centered around grief and trauma, she scrapped the script entirely. Instead, she gave Depp the freedom to speak freely, to channel whatever came naturally in the moment. It was a gamble, but it worked. 1. Particularly intense scene reportedly brought the entire set to a standstill. In it, Depp's character returns to the site of a bombing where he once photographed a family just days before their death. The script had only a single stage direction. He remembers. What Depp delivered instead was a 6-minute monologue, unscripted, entirely improvised, spoken through tears and choked breath. The crew, stunned into silence, didn't call cut. They let the camera roll. When the scene finally ended, there wasn't a dry eye on set. Leila Jordan later described that moment as a rupture in the space between performance and truth. She added, "Johnny didn't just act. He remembered. I don't know what it was, whose memory it belonged to. But what we saw wasn't rehearsed, it was lived." Even the film's trauma consultant, who had worked on emotionally heavy productions before, admitted they had never seen an actor tap into something so personal, so raw. Depp's transformation for the role wasn't only internal, his physical. Appearance, too, took fans and industry insiders by surprise. He dropped noticeable weight, grew out his hair unevenly, and allowed deep lines to form under his eyes. He wanted the audience to feel the wear and tear of a man who had been on the front lines for decades, not just of war zones, but of his own battles. The wardrobe was another example of quiet brilliance. Every outfit in the film was either second-hand or actual clothing worn by journalists in conflict zones. There was no wardrobe team rushing in to fix wrinkles or perfect the fit. Authenticity was the priority. And then there's the now-famous camera. In the leaked photos that sparked global attention, Depp is seen gripping an old Leica. Not a replica, not a prop, but an original camera from the 1970s. What most people didn't know at first was that the camera belonged to the actual journalist who inspired the story. After his passing, the family reached out to the production, offering the camera to be used in the film. It was a deeply emotional gesture, and one Depp took incredibly seriously. In fact, he refused to let anyone else handle it between takes, carrying it with him constantly during shooting, sometimes even sleeping with it. Crew members recounted how Depp would sometimes speak to the camera during breaks, whispering to it as though it were a living relic. One assistant grip said, "It was eerie, but it made sense. It was like he was in conversation with the ghost of the man he was portraying." Off camera, Depp was reportedly quiet, reflective, and kept mostly to himself. He wasn't the charismatic, guitar-strumming storyteller people had grown used to seeing in interviews. Instead, he was deeply immersed in solitude, often walking the set alone before sunrise, scouting locations in silence. At one point during a rain delay, he pulled out a notebook and began sketching, not doodles, but detailed illustrations of scenes they'd shot earlier that day. A few of those sketches were later shared anonymously online, and fans were shocked by their intensity. The images were dark, moody, and emotionally charged, not unlike the man himself. While the production was relatively small, with a tight budget and a skeleton crew, what they lacked in money they made up for in heart. No trailers, no personal assistants. Meals were eaten together at long folding tables. Depp insisted on being treated no differently than the rest of the cast and crew. He even offered to pay out of pocket for a day's shoot when a key location fell through last minute. "This isn't about money," he was quoted as saying. "It's about telling the story right." As word began to spread about the film's emotional depth, several major festivals reportedly reached out, hoping to secure early screenings, but Jordan and the producers remained protective. "We don't want this to be a press circus," she told one journalist. "This is a film about silence, about grief, about things that don't make headlines. We want to honor that." Still, excitement continues to build. Fans who've seen even brief clips have taken to social media, describing Depp's performance as devastating, soul-bearing, and the kind of acting that breaks you. One user posted, "It's not Johnny acting like someone who's broken, it's Johnny showing us how it feels to be broken." And maybe that's what makes this role so monumental. It's not about spectacle or special effects. It's not about box office numbers or franchise returns. It's about one man, flawed, wounded, and unafraid to feel deeply. Opening a window into the quiet, aching corners of the human experience. For Johnny Depp, Whispers of the Frontline may not be the kind of film that lands you a billion-dollar payday. There are no CGI-laden battles, no whimsical fantasy worlds, no high-seas adventure with explosive box office expectations. This isn't about franchise fame or commercial clout. It's about something else entirely. Something quieter, more intimate, more human, and that shift in focus may be precisely what makes it one of the most significant choices of his entire career. This role is not just another character in a long filmography, it's a revelation, a baring of the soul. And in doing so, it might just cement Johnny Depp's legacy not as a quirky character actor or a tabloid headline magnate, but as an artist with something deeply personal, painfully raw, and truly profound to say. Depp has long been known for disappearing into his roles, often transforming himself so completely that audiences forget the man behind the mask. From the scissor-handed recluse to the swaggering pirate, he's mastered the art of eccentricity. But Whispers of the Frontline strips all that away. No fantasy, no costumes, no surreal flourishes. just a man and his broken past. It's the kind of performance that doesn't need a theatrical twist or a larger-than-life persona. The power lies in its restraint, in its aching stillness, in the haunted looks and quiet pauses that say more than any line of dialogue ever could. And that's the difference. This isn't about escapism, it's about confronting pain, living in it, letting it bleed into the performance until you're no longer sure where the character ends and the actor begins. From what insiders are saying, Depp didn't approach this project like just another film gig. He approached it like a reckoning, a confrontation with the ghosts that have haunted him, both on screen and off. The film's central figure, a war journalist grappling with PTSD and addiction, feels eerily parallel to the emotional terrain Depp himself has publicly navigated. Legal battles, personal loss, fractured relationships, the constant glare of media scrutiny. Those wounds don't disappear just because the cameras stop rolling. And it seems this role offered him a way to process that, to channel the weight of his own experience into something that might resonate far beyond his own pain. People close to the production have spoken of moments where filming came to a complete halt, not because of a faulty camera, lighting issues, or a last-minute script change, but because the emotion in the room became so powerful that continuing felt impossible. These weren't just ordinary filming delays, they were the kind of moments that transcend the routine of a movie set. Everyone there could feel it. The energy shifted. Something unspoken filled the space. It was as though the air itself had thickened with emotion, and all that could be done was to sit in silence and bear witness. The most talked-about moment reportedly occurred during a late-night shoot, well past midnight, when exhaustion was already pressing in on the cast and crew. The scene, by design, had no scripted lines. It was one of those experimental moments the director, Leila Jordan, insisted on. A scene where the actor would let emotion lead the performance, rather than the script. Depp was standing alone in the corner of a bombed-out building set, surrounded by remnants of war-torn props. Rubble, scattered film canisters, an old camera dangling from his neck. The camera began to roll, and Depp stood motionless for nearly 30 seconds. Then something broke open. What followed was not acting. It was a man unraveling. He began to speak, softly at first, like someone remembering a distant voice. He talked about loss, about helplessness, about witnessing something so painful you wish your eyes had never seen it. And he spoke of guilt. It wasn't clear whether he was speaking in character or not. That's what made it so haunting. He wept mid-sentence, his voice cracking under the weight of whatever he was dredging up. Crew members, many of whom had worked on dozens of sets, stopped what they were doing. Some lowered their eyes. Others stood completely still, transfixed. No one shouted, "Cut!" No one dared. According to a grip who was working boom that night, we were watching a man tear his own soul open, and there was nothing we could do but let him. One assistant director later described the moment as watching a man confess something he'd never said out loud before. It wasn't performative. It wasn't for the camera. It was personal. Achingly, terrifyingly personal. The silence that followed when Depp finally stopped speaking was heavy. No one clapped. No one moved for nearly a minute. Even the camera operator was frozen, his hand trembling slightly on the focus ring. Finally, the director approached Depp slowly, not to give direction, but to gently rest a hand on his shoulder. There were tears in her eyes, too. It was a shared moment of human fragility, the kind that makes everyone forget they're on a set. In that instant, the boundary between actor and character completely dissolved. That level of vulnerability is almost unheard of in film. Most actors, no matter how skilled, keep a protective layer between themselves and their roles. It's a survival mechanism, a necessary separation to avoid getting consumed by the weight of the performance. But Depp, in that moment, didn't protect himself. He didn't filter the pain. He gave it fully, without artifice. And for those who witnessed it, that scene didn't feel like fiction. It felt like truth, like one man finally saying something. The world had never truly heard from him before, and yet it wasn't done for awards or applause. There's something refreshingly unpretentious about this project, shot on a tight indie budget with minimal lighting setups and thrifted wardrobe pieces. The entire production seems to echo a desire for authenticity. Leila Jordan, the director, reportedly told the crew from day one that this film was not going to be acted, it was going to be felt. She encouraged improvisation, discomfort, silence. She gave Depp the space to bring his own memories into the role, not to sensationalize them, but to honor them. That decision, to prioritize emotional truth over cinematic polish, speaks volumes about the kind of story they're trying to tell. It's not about making a film that entertains, it's about making a film that understands. There's something almost poetic about the timing of this project in Depp's life. After years of being caricatured in the press, his personal struggles, splashed across tabloids, his name dragged through endless headlines. This role allows him to reclaim the narrative. Not by denying his past, but by transforming it into art. That's what real storytelling does. It doesn't offer clean resolutions or happy endings. It offers truth in all its messy, painful beauty. And for Depp, Whispers of the Frontline may be the clearest expression yet of who he is when all the costumes are stripped away. The film's quiet power has already begun to ripple beyond the industry. Early screenings for select critics and insiders have generated murmurs of something extraordinary. Not because the film is flashy or revolutionary in its structure, but because of how deeply it lingers in the heart. One critic reportedly walked out of a private screening unable to speak for several minutes. Another described it as a portrait of pain that doesn't beg for sympathy, it just asks to be seen. And that's the kind of impact that transcends the screen. That's the kind of film that finds its way into conversations long after the lights come up. For longtime fans of Depp, this role may feel like a culmination, a turning point where the artistry finally catches up with the emotional depth he's always hinted at. For newcomers, it may be the first time they see him not as a larger-than-life icon, but as a man, weathered and wounded, trying to make sense of the world through his work. And for Depp himself, it may be the first time he's felt free to use that work as a form of release, of redemption, of remembrance. It's easy to forget in a world of social media soundbites and celebrity gossip that actors are people, that they carry real experiences, real grief, real regrets. Depp has spent decades hiding behind personas, retreating into roles that allowed him to escape his own story. But in Whispers of the Frontline, he doesn't run. He doesn't hide. He steps into the light, burdened but unbroken, and offers something breathtaking in its vulnerability. This is not the kind of film that will top the box office charts or dominate awards season predictions. It might never even reach the wide audience it deserves. But that doesn't matter. What matters is what it represents. For Johnny Depp, for the art of storytelling, and for anyone who's ever carried something too heavy to speak aloud. It's a reminder that cinema, at its best, isn't about escapism. It's about empathy, connection, truth. And in this performance, Johnny Depp doesn't just act. He bleeds, he remembers, he heals. And for those watching, perhaps they will, too. So do you think this could be Johnny Depp's most powerful role yet? If you've seen those viral photos, if you felt something stir inside you while watching him kneel in that rubble-strewn alley, holding on to memory and pain, then you already know the answer. This isn't just another movie. It's a reckoning, and if you're hungry for more stories that go beyond the surface, for behind-the-scenes insights that explore the why behind the what, then you won't want to miss our next video, where we take a deeper look at the psychological toll Depp experienced while filming his emotionally charged scene in Spain. Trust us, it's just as riveting. In the meantime, if this story moved you even a little, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and don't forget to ring the bell so you're the first to know when we drop more content that cuts through the noise. Because here, we don't just watch movies, we feel them. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and never be afraid to look beyond the script.